makes it very terrifying. Now, it's time for our subscribers' pick. This horrifying image has made rounds on the internet for years, and so far, no one has been able to tell what exactly happened to the person in the image. However, we are reminded of the story of a young lady who lived in the 1900s. She was the only daughter of her parents who tried everything to have another child, but could not. During the sleeping sickness pandemic, she started showing a different symptom, including tears in her flesh, in addition to the paralysis of her body. Her parents feared that she was becoming a monster, and so they abandoned her and fled. Some have blamed the parents for such an inhumane act, while some believe that it was the best thing to do. What do you think should have been done? Let us know in the comments. Now, to the next terrifying disease on our list. Smallpox. This is one of history's deadliest diseases, as it has killed over 300 million people since 1900. The virus that causes smallpox comes in two forms. One, the relatively mild variola minor, and its deadlier cousin, variola major. These tiny infectious particles have traveled around the world, taking the trade and exploration routes, and touching humans with high fevers and several lesions on their skin. The first time smallpox appeared was in 1796, and the outbreak continued well into the 1900s. In most cases, victims of variola major ended up dead, and those who managed to survive are left with scars forever. As this disease continued to kill, scientists worked around the clock to get vaccines to combat the virus. Eventually, vaccines were available in 1949, and a large-scale vaccination finally eliminated smallpox from the United States. However, the other parts of the world would experience the disease for 3 more decades. The efforts to globally eradicate smallpox began slowly, but after 1966, the campaign accelerated. Technological innovations such as freeze-dried vaccines and the bifurcated needle made vaccination more effective and simpler to administer. Initially, health workers conducted mass vaccinations, but over time, they switched to a more targeted strategy. Teams would quickly track down new cases, isolate the infected, and vaccinate all of those who may have had contact with the infected person. And by the end of 1979, smallpox was finally declared eradicated. Unfortunately, that can't be said about the next disease, bird flu. From the name, isn't it supposed to be a thing of the birds? Well, it was. The first time bird flu, also known as avian influenza, was described was in 1878 in Italy, and all humans at the time knew was that it affected and killed birds. But by 1997, this disease had been transmitted to humans from birds. As you must have already guessed, people who work with poultry, waterfowl, and livestock are mostly at risk of the virus known as influenza A, or H5N1. This virus can cause severe respiratory symptoms and also eye infection and pneumonia that results in the deaths of most victims. Bird flu is really terrifying because it affects humans and wildlife, and that can reduce the food supply. And the craziest part? It has not been eradicated like some deadly diseases, and so still very much around. While there has been no known human-to-human transmission, there have been 55 cases reported in the US this year, which begs the question, will bird flu ever go away? Well, no one knows when this outbreak will end, as more research is being done. However, considering how long it has been around, maybe, just maybe, we have to learn to live with it. You may not really be familiar with bird flu if you don't keep poultry, but this next disease is so famous and deadly. COVID-19. Yeah, no other than the infamous COVID-19 that got us all locked up and forced us to stay away from one another. We shouldn't have to discuss this disease because of its fame, but this list would be incomplete without it. As you must already know, the disease is caused by coronaviruses, which are a family of viruses that can cause respiratory illness in humans. The name corona came from the crown-like spikes on the surface of the virus. And of course, the 19 comes from 2019, the year it was first reported in Wuhan, China. Since then, it has spread to every country around the world. The virus as we know it enters the body through the mouth, nose, or eyes, directly from the airborne droplets, or from the transfer of the virus from the hands to the face. It then travels to the back of your nasal passages and the mucous membrane in the back of your throat. There, it attaches to cells and begins to multiply like every other virus, and then moves into lung tissue. From there, the virus can spread to other body tissues. Within 3 years, the disease has killed over 7.3 million people worldwide, including over 1 million people in the US, 800,000 in Russia, 690,000 in Brazil, and 530 in India. According to experts, these rates could have been underestimated, and they believe that some countries recorded more than 10 times higher than reported. Putting unreported deaths into account, the COVID-19 toll makes it qualify as the third leading cause of death. Thankfully, we were able to get vaccines to prevent this virus. However, COVID-19 is still around and still taking the lives of its victims. The good news, however, is that the death toll has significantly decreased, just like another famous disease on this list. HIV/AIDS. This is another disease known by almost every human. It is believed that HIV originally came from a virus particular to chimpanzees in West Africa during the 1930s, and was originally transmitted to humans through the transfer of blood through hunting. However, it wasn't until the early 1980s, when rare types of pneumonia, cancer, and other illnesses were being reported to doctors, that the world became aware of HIV and AIDS. Initially, all doctors knew was that people with a weakened immune system were more likely to be diagnosed with HIV/AIDS. In healthy people, the immune response is enough to keep these conditions at bay. By 1981, doctors and researchers began to notice a set of symptoms in previously healthy young males who had sex with other males. At first, healthcare providers called the disease gay-related immune deficiency. However, doctors also began to observe that intravenous drug users also experienced the same symptoms. Much later, researchers identified the leading methods of HIV transmission and learned that a person could not contract HIV from casual contact, food, water, or air. It took a while to completely understand the concept of HIV/AIDS, and now we know a lot about it. HIV infection happens in 3 stages. Without treatment, it gets worse over time and eventually overpowers your immune system. Symptoms of HIV can look a lot like those of other viral illnesses, and they vary from one person to another. If you have HIV, your symptoms could look different from those of someone else. Symptoms are also dependent on how long a person has been treating HIV and other factors. Accompanying HIV is AIDS, which stands for acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. It's the most advanced stage of HIV infection, which occurs when your CD4 T cell count drops below 200 and your immune system is badly damaged. Once the immune system is damaged, the body is opened to different diseases, which can eventually lead to death. Since the beginning of the epidemic, 88.4 million people have been infected with HIV. and about 42.3 million people have died of HIV. At the end of 2023, 39.9 million people were living with HIV globally, with over 1 million living in the US and 1 in 7 people unaware of their status. The good thing is that the death toll has kept decreasing since the FDA approved zidovudine, the first antiretroviral medication that could treat HIV in 1987. And now, advances in HIV medications have made the condition manageable with regular treatment. Above all, researchers are working on a preventive vaccine that would help to eradicate HIV worldwide. Everyone knows that HIV/AIDS kills, but what most people may not know is that this next disease is also life-threatening. Malaria. To most people in African countries, malaria is a simple disease that sometimes requires little effort to cure, but in reality, it is a life-threatening disease. It is caused by parasites that are transmitted to people through the bites of infected female Anopheles mosquitoes. 5 parasite species cause malaria in humans, but only 2 of these species, which are Plasmodium falciparum and Plasmodium vivax, pose the greatest threat. The history of malaria extends from its prehistoric origin as a zoonotic disease in the primates of Africa until today. It is still common there. For hundreds of years, its prevention and treatment have been targeted in science and medicine. Since the discovery of the Plasmodium parasites that cause it, research attention has focused on their biology, as well as that of the mosquitoes that transmit the parasites. And in this century, we can say that scientists have fully understood everything about this disease, including its different symptoms. Symptoms range from very mild illness to severe disease, and even death. And early symptoms can include fever, chills, headache, muscle ache, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. If malaria is not treated quickly, symptoms can include kidney failure, seizures, mental confusion, and coma. In 2022, nearly half of the world's population was at risk of malaria, with sub-Saharan Africa carrying a disproportionately high share of the global malaria burden. In the same year, there were an estimated 249 million cases of malaria, and the estimated number of malaria deaths stood at 608,000, with children under the age of 5 being the most vulnerable group affected by malaria, accounting for nearly 80% of all malaria deaths in the WHO African region. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.